reasonable suspicion of child abuse. Of course, you get direct reports from students, so they'll come to you and they'll say, hey, this is what's going on with me. Or your observation, you may see a bruise, or something, some type of injury. There may be other concerned peers of students. Friends may approach you and say, hey, I'm worried about my friend, or, and so, also, you may hear it from other teachers or staff members, people in the community, parents. Or even right now, social media is a big thing, so, students may come approach you and say, hey, we've seen this on TikTok or Instagram. And also student submissions from writing forms.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ms. Richards. For those of you who may not know, I'm the 8th grade counselor. All right, so on this slide, we're gonna talk about the types of abuse and neglect. So the 5 types, the first one, physical abuse, obviously that's the most obvious one, where you'll notice either bruises, welts, abrasions, burns, any physical injury to the body. So if you see any of that, obviously you know that you're gonna report. Also sexual abuse, any of non-specific sexual behaviors by a caregiver to a child. Then we have emotional abuse, and that can include confinement, isolation, verbal assault, humiliation, intimidation, or any other treatment which may diminish the sense of identity, dignity, and self-worth. Neglect. So if a caregiver deliberately or by disregard permits the child to experience, so with neglect it's really about exposure. So if a child is exposed to any type of suffering, and that can include, physical, intellectual, social, or emotional capacities. And so domestic violence falls under that, and some other things that we'll discuss on another slide. Commercial sexual exploitation of children, human sex trafficking. We all know that this is huge, and it happens a lot, especially in Henry County. We have a lot of instances of that occurring. That's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a child for the purpose of sexual activity. All right, so to go into neglect a little bit more, remember the word is exposure. So if a child is exposed to any drug or alcohol abuse, exposure of a child to domestic violence, leaving a young child with inadequate supervision or unrealistic expectations, failure to seek necessary medical care, failure to provide basic needs for a child, and then some other examples of neglect, chronic hunger, excessive sleepiness. If you notice, you have a student come into class and they're constantly putting their head down, they're tired all the time, that's something that you would want to report. Has been abandoned or rejected. Malnutrition, if you have students that are constantly, you notice they're begging for food, they're constantly hungry, and you just have a suspicion of something, you would want to report that. Or any talks of violence at home. If they mention any sort of police presence, that's something that you would also want to report, okay?
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Mrs. Mulvane, I'm a 7th grade counselor. And so the other thing that we wanted to talk about are some of those effects. So the students who, and this one gets kind of tricky because we hear that students are talking about, oh, last night my parents got in a fight, my mom pushed my sister, or my dad pushed my mom or hit my mom, and you're not really sure. That is something that we do want to report as well, because we know that, even being exposed to domestic violence definitely can leave an impact on our students. And some of those effects can be, the big one is they might have emotional outbursts, they may be aggressive, they may have a lot of anxiety, fear, those sorts of things. And then obviously it can lead to those cognitive and attitude problems, like this poor school performance, lack of conflict resolution skills, because of course the way they're seeing things get handled at home is physically. And then it can also lead to long-term problems that are associated with that trauma that they've experienced. So higher levels of depression, increased levels of tolerance for violence as they grow up as well. And so then we have, and this is probably the most obvious that we see, the physical abuse. So this could be the student that comes in with maybe some cuts, bruises, and they don't really have a good excuse for why they happened, or maybe through the course of the day, their reason for their bruises or cuts may change. They could be patterns of bruises or marks, left from maybe a belt or a cord or something like that. Injuries on areas that wouldn't typically be injured. So we've seen like marks maybe on their stomach where you're like, okay, if you're telling me you fell off your bike and you have a cut on your stomach, like, does that really make sense? So, we're not asking you to like investigate or like question the student, but you kind of know things don't make sense. Like if they have a skinned knee and you know that they just got a new scooter and they say they fell on their scooter, that's one thing. But if they are coming in and they have all these lines, patterns of lines, and they're saying, well, I fell off my bike last night. You just kind of know. Doesn't make sense. And then if they're scared to go home for some reason, just telling you that, they know their mom's gonna be mad at them tonight, they don't wanna go home, they're scared of their parents. Or, I know kids have their favorite hoodies, they're gonna wear their same shirt all the time. That doesn't necessarily mean something's going on, but again, it's kind of that gut feeling, are they trying to hide their arms, their legs, it's really hot and they're complaining they're so hot, but they won't take their sweatshirt off, or, something like that. Okay, all right. Oh, it's you.
Yeah. Take over. All right, signs of sexual abuse. Child acts out sexually. Of course, child may wear many layers of clothing, kind of what April was talking about a little bit. Sexual knowledge for inappropriate, depending on their age. So if they may know more than what they may need to know for that age, it might be a sign of sexual abuse. Complaints of their, pain in their genital area might be another sign. Or fear to go with a particular person. And if they disclose it, because, we have some students that may just, in conversation, they just may disclose that they've been sexually abused. So tagging into a little bit about what Ms. Richards was talking about, the commercial sexual exploitation of a child or domestic minor sex trafficking. So this may look like inappropriate clothing, dressing over age, a significantly older boyfriend or girlfriend, little to no eye contact, special mark tattoos. So as you guys can see, one of the tattoos could be a barcode, okay? New clothes, jewelry, phones, not eating, sudden change in appearance and behaviors, crying outburst, anger without a cause, artwork that's typically disturbing, and possible unexplained bruises or other injuries. So those are just some of the different signs.
All right, so this next slide. So school-based reporting procedures. First and foremost, last year you all did an amazing job with your reporting. So I would definitely say keep doing what you're doing. As you all know, you report immediately. So if you have a suspicion of something, you're not investigating. So your job is not to investigate and to dig deep and to ask questions. But if you have a suspicion, then you need to report it to us immediately. Okay, so can everybody repeat after me and say immediately?
Immediately.
And that's important because even in our district training, they let us know, like, we're not supposed to wait until the end of the day or towards the end of the day to start doing our defects reports if something was reported to us in the morning. So even though technically we do have 24 hours, that window, they're really getting hardcore with that even. Like, they don't want us to wait that long. So if a student does come to you in the morning, I know you all are busy, but you will have to get someone to cover your class so that you can get to us directly. Do not send an email, and I don't really think we had any issues with that, so nobody did that. You all did an amazing job, like with any suspicions. I know with the 8th grade teachers, they came, if there was an activity that they did and they noticed something, they would come to me with that, so keep doing that. Reports should be made face-to-face. So we already talked about that. Report all information that causes suspicion of abuse, neglect, and provide any other details that might be related. And so that's important because on the DFATS referral, they do have a section where they do ask for additional information. So even if you have a suspicion, maybe you know that this child does come from a good home, so there might be parental involvement, maybe they're involved in sports, or they may have siblings that you have concerns for. So if you just have that information, that's something that you can give to us as well. And then, of course, we'll follow through with the report to DFACS, and we just follow the district protocol. So if for some reason a school designee cannot be located, you can contact DFACS directly, and we're gonna give you that information shortly and talk about that procedure. And you also can contact the Student Services Department if you need assistance. So I think the main thing is, do not wait until dismissal. And so sometimes as you're going through your day, you know, you get busy and then you realize at 3:30, like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot, and then you run into the office. Don't do that. So as much as possible, try not to do that, okay? All right, we go to the next slide. So after hours. So we're all mandated reporters. So if something is happening here in the school building, obviously, yes, you're gonna either come to me, April, or Shanice. We also have a school social worker. We have a new school social worker this year. Oh, there he is. I didn't realize you were here. So he's gonna be with us. Can you remind me of your last name again?
Mrs. Satterwhite.
Okay, yes, and so he will be here to help you as well. So anything that's happening during school, you all let us know. However, if it's after hours, if it's on the weekend, then you're responsible for contacting DFACS. And so the way that will work is you can call 1-855-GEORGIA-CHILD. It's 24/7, and the process is not as intimidating as it might sound. It really isn't. It's just like a questionnaire that they go through, all right? Also, an important number that you wanna keep is the non-emergency county line for law enforcement. So let's say you just wanna do a wellness check, and this is good information to have even if it's just a family member or a friend. You don't wanna call 911, but maybe you have a concern and you just want a wellness check done, you can call the non-emergency line, and that way you can have that happen. So those are numbers to keep in your phone. I also wanna point out that when you do make a DFACS referral, it is anonymous. And I know sometimes people are concerned about, well, I don't want anybody to know that I made it, but it's anonymous. However, if you are using 911, that's open record. So that's something to note. Let's see here. Once you all report, so if there's anything after hours that you're reporting, you still have to let us know, because we're still responsible for actually submitting a written DFACS referral to the county. All right, so you're not doing that part. If you have to call a report, you do that, but then you follow up with us the following day, and then we will then submit that written report to the county, okay? So we're gonna give you all some time if you need to get those numbers down, or a screenshot, take a picture of it. Yeah, you're gonna get it, yeah, that's awesome. You're also gonna have it, so it's up to you.
And I think it's on the handout as well.
It's on there, okay, perfect. Perfect.
Did anyone need me to go back? You are gonna get this in an email. Okay, so basically, just don't get caught in a situation with failure to report, because if it comes out that you knew some information, but you just didn't report it for whatever reason, maybe you didn't think it was necessary to report, or you just didn't feel comfortable reporting it, you could lose your certificate, your teaching certificate. And we have seen people lose their jobs in Henry County because of not reporting. So please, 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 if you're having a feeling about something, please report it to us as soon as possible. Again, sometimes this happened a couple times last year where a teacher would come to me at the end of the day and I had to stop the child from going home. And so, in one case, the child was already on the bus. And so that's why it's really important that we find out as soon as possible so that we can have everything in place to make sure that child is safe. So just let us know as soon as you get any information, so that we can look into that. Let me see what else I wanted to say. Oh yeah, don't ever just screen things out either. Like, well, I kind of think maybe, but I don't know. If you ever are questioning, just let us know, okay? And then we'll do with whatever we need to do with that information. But the other thing that was reminded to us in our training is that sometimes teachers will come to us and they'll say, I'm sure this is nothing and you don't need to report it, but I'm just letting you know. Just know we're going to report that, okay? Because I'm not gonna go down because we just weren't sure, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're gonna report it. So just know that once you come, now I'm not trying to scare you until you don't come to us. That's quite the opposite. I'm just saying, don't come to us and say, I kind of have this feeling, but you don't need to report it because I'm already starting the report. In my mind, I'm already like, okay, what am I reporting? Because if it's important enough for you to mention it to me, it's important enough for me to report it. Okay? Okay, so our first scenario. So a 14-year-old student arrives at school, has a cut on his right cheek, not chest, cheek. He tells you that his father was playing basketball with him and accidentally hit him during the game. What do you do? Does anyone want to share what they would do? Yes.
I will come to you.
And let me know. Yes. And I would report that. Okay, I would meet with the student, but depending on how the student, explained things to me, I may end up reporting that, okay? Not 100%, but again, it depends on exactly what, how it comes out, what he shares with me. Because sometimes what happens is he tells you that, you come and tell me, and then when I talk to him, he said, oh, I was playing with my cousin, and, we were playing football. Oh, okay, red flag. Okay, you've already changed your story. Something's going on, okay? So yes, report it. All right, next scenario.
All right. Okay, so a student comes to school and tells you that his mother slapped his father last night. The student begs you not to say anything because he will get in trouble. What do you do? Come on. I'm reporting to you.
Report it!
I'm reporting everything.
Yes, as you should.
Absolutely, yes. You do report it because even though it's not directly happening to the student, but he's witnessing that type of domestic violence at home. Okay, so yes, you still report it. Good job, y'all. Good students. Yeah.
All right, so here's another one. And situations like this came up last year. So a student learns that they failed a test in your class, and they tell you now they're afraid to go home because of what their parent might do, how they might react to the news. Go ahead. Everybody knows now. We're reporting. Yeah, you report. Because our job is not to investigate. Like, we don't even investigate. We're just reporting. DFACS investigates, and if it's something that they screen out, then they screen out. But we're just erring on the side of caution so that we don't end up in trouble or on the news. So that's all that we're doing, okay? With that being said, and you all do really good like with your activities with your students and connecting. I would say there are some things, just be cautious that there are some activities, like if you're really trying to connect with your students and it's personal, it might unleash something. So there might be ways that you can ask something as far as like vacations, for example. If you say something like, what was your worst experience over vacation? You can expect that you might be unleashing something here. You know what I'm saying? You might be opening up that door. So of course you want to connect with your students, but if you unleash that, then you have to follow through. I mean, you can't say, well, I did this activity on Monday, I read it Friday, but technically it was reported to you on Monday. So if you're doing that, you have to be really careful. Like if you're gonna open up that box and ask these types of open-ended questions where you don't know what somebody's experience might be. You might not be expecting it, but they might have had a horrible experience over vacation. And they report that and they write that down, they're sharing that with you, and you don't look at it because you're busy, naturally, you don't get to that until the following week. That's an issue, okay? So I would just say, be mindful, okay? Here.
Last year, I did some writing and it was so heavy, I was like, I'm not doing it with anybody else. It opened those things that I was not expecting to read.
Right.
Even though I said up front, if you put anything on there that I gotta report, I'm gonna have to report it. And they still like,
Yeah.
So, but I'm thinking like that's kind of with anything, you can expect the unexpected. That's true. As soon as you read it, make sure you make that report if you need to.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
And I just want to add too, even if a student tells you about something that happened to them 3 years ago in the past, you still report that too. Even if they say, the police were involved, this happened last year, the police got involved, I had a DFACS caseworker. And so in your mind, you're like, okay, it's taken care of, still report that. Because what happens too is that sometimes students will tell you all of this, but really that's not necessarily what happened, and they might be trying to cover for something. And so even if you hear about something that happened in the past, you still have to report that as well, okay?
All right, so in summary, mandated reporting is an immediate requirement. Always have a plan for getting information to the school counselor, social worker, administrator, or designated reporter when needed. Information needs to be directly shared, so don't put it in writing. Never rely on email as a form of communication. When in doubt, if you're unsure, just err on the side of caution and just report, okay? Involve your school counselor, social workers to assist with reporting requirements, and call for assistance if you need help. All right, any questions about that? All right, Friday. Okay, all right, so.
So we're gonna move right along to, the suicide prevention and intervention training.
And so with suicide training, we know these topics are real heavy for everyone. But if this is hitting too close to home, you need to step out. We totally understand. We can meet with you one-on-one to discuss this, and do a training. I think we're recording this so you can watch it online if you're not comfortable being in this space right now. Feel free to take a second and step out. That's totally fine. But we do have to be mindful of, some of the things, the risk factors that our students are dealing with. So we're gonna go through some suicide prevention training now. So during this training, we're going to learn the risk factors for suicide. We're gonna learn protective measures to help our students feel safe and feel that they're, have worth and that, everyone belongs. That's what our goal is here. And then to understand what to do and how to get help for those students when maybe they do need that help and they're struggling. And we're gonna also tell you about some national resources for that as well, and local resources. So, starts with, why is this so important? Because, and mostly, even more so since the pandemic, suicide is now the second leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds. It's the third leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. And we know that 17.2% of students say that they have considered suicide within the last 12 months, which is, very high. And this just goes back to those pandemic, how much of an impact this has had on our students. So emergency room visits for suspected suicide attempts among individuals 12 to 25 fell, but then began to rise again in 2020. And then they're up more than 26% among girls ages 12 to 17. And then the suicide attempts increased nearly 51% compared to the same period in 2019 before COVID. So we know these kids, we've seen this. It's real important that we're aware of the warning signs for suicide. So there are some differences here between, is this me still? Yes. Okay, there are some differences. So we're gonna talk about risk factors, warning signs, and protective factors, because all of these are different. So risk factors are going to be those things that are making it more likely that a student might consider suicide. The warning signs are those things that we're gonna look for, these are things that the student is considering and this might happen right now. And then the protective factors are gonna be those things that we put in place that make our kids feel worthy and safe and protected so that they are less likely to attempt suicide. Okay, and those risk factors, so those things that our students are dealing with that might make them more at risk for suicide are previous suicide attempts, alcohol and drug abuse, mental illness, impulsive and aggressive tendencies, hopelessness, history of trauma or abuse, family history of suicide, and LGBTQ identification.
So if you notice risk factors for suicide, the best thing for you to do is to contact your school counselor, school social worker, or an administrator, okay? And also continue just to build those meaningful relationships with those students, because of course you guys are so important in their lives, and so just disconnecting that wouldn't be a good thing. Increase your protective factors that may save a child's life. Tell them how much they mean to you. Tell them how much they're needed here on earth. Just making sure that their confidence is built. And just go from there. Alright, so these are some warning signs for suicidal thoughts. So number one, 4 out of 5 teens who attempt suicide give clear warning signs, okay? So number one, they're talking about it, okay? And sometimes they may talk about being a burden to others. Making or writing statements, so we had a lot of that, I know from 6th grade, a lot of that last year. They would just either write notes, death notes, things like that. A deepening depression, okay? Preoccupation with death. Taking unnecessary risk or exhibiting self-destructive behaviors, out of character behaviors. A loss of interest in things that they care about, right? Visiting or calling people they once cared about, making arrangements, setting one affairs in order, or giving prized possessions away. So if you notice any of those warning signs, what do you all need to do? Report it. Excellent. Alright, so how do students ask for help? Alright, so in dialogue with students, often students will disclose their thoughts, plans with peers first, take all concerns from peers seriously. Cause sometimes they may say it, right? And by the time they get to us, they're like, no, I was just playing. So it's just like, okay, what happened from then till now? So obviously there is some type of concern, right? With written exercises such as writing prompts, literatures, or other things like we kind of talked about a little bit, and dialogue with teachers or other staff, nonverbal expressions during, before, after the school days. So like self-injury, so we do have some of our kids that are cutters, and sudden changes in behavior and sense of expression of hopelessness. So suicide attempts, some may just have that attempt or have a plan in place. So making a referral for suicide assessment. So designated student services personnel, which is us, will be notified, and we do the assessments. You all don't do the assessments, okay? Your responsibility is just to report it to us. That's the biggest thing, okay? Alright.
Keep going. Okay.
Alright, so here are some protective factors. So mental health care, effective mental health care. So obviously maybe some outside therapy would be really good. Connecting this with individuals. So again, your role is so important. So connecting with your students. I know we talked about connectivity and inclusivity, and making sure when our students do come first day that we just build that relationship, build that rapport, and connect with them. And these are the reasons as to why. Because you are their trusted person. Okay? Problem solving skills, conflict resolution skills, a lot of that, they're just probably thinking like, I can't solve it, so you know what, I'm just gonna go this route. Social skills, impulse control, coping skills, hope for the future, reasons for living, and supportive peers, in contact with caregivers. And creating safe spaces, again, at the top of the list, building positive relationships with students. Okay, encourage supportive communications and actions in your classroom. I know we had the no hate thing at one point. I don't know if that's still a thing. It's not, okay. All right, safe zone, safe space. I know there's different, I think activities for that or stickers. But know which students struggle with depression and other, that's, again, knowing your kids and connecting with them. Know which students struggle with, I just said that. Always be aware, actively identify students that need help. And all kids need to know that they matter. You matter! Oh, I'm sorry, sorry. Sorry. Okay. All right. Okay, so here are some national resources. Okay, so we have the Georgia Crisis and Access Line, 1-800-715-4225. So what they do, you call that number, and there will be a therapist that will come out and they will assess. They'll come to the home and they'll assess the student. And then they'll decide what they need from that point. And my GCAL app is the same thing. And then you have the suicide prevention hotline.
Yeah, and all of those resources link back to the Georgia Crisis and Access Line.
Yep.
So the app and the suicide prevention, all those calls go there to them. All right.
All right, and this is also just a new resource, so you wouldn't have to dial that long number. You would just dial 988, or you text it to 988, and then you'll be connected to the National Suicide Hotline.
Can I jump in and just say too, you know, when you have that concern, warning signs, you know, a student discloses something or something about another student, when you need to report something to us, it's really important that you keep that student supervised at all times, okay? This isn't where you say, hey, maybe you should check in with Miss Mulvane later, or I'll email Miss Mulvane and have her get with you. That's something that is immediately we need to be aware of, and typically what we would do, and you all were really good about this, is just call us to come to your classroom and we can escort the student to the counseling office and meet with them. But once you are thinking that there might be some sort of suicide assessment necessary, we never want that student to be unsupervised. So don't say, hey, why don't you just go up to the counseling office and I'll let them know you're on your way. Because we may not be there, you're leaving that time, a student may say, you know, I don't want to go to the counseling office, I'm gonna walk out the door and go home, I don't know. So definitely make sure that when you get any feeling that you want us to assess a student for suicide, that you keep that student supervised at all times. They should never be without an adult at that point, okay?
All right, counseling,
Hold on. That's not.
all right, so let's do this scenario. A student writes a letter to her teacher saying, life is so awful for me and I wish it was over. You talk to the student, she says she was only kidding. What do?
Yes. There you go. Walk the student to us, yes. Or call for us so that we can come and get the student. Yep, but we never leave the student unsupervised. And you'll see too in the counseling office, we will never leave the student unsupervised. We always make sure if it's not one of us, it's Tina, it's someone is, an adult always has eyes on that student, just so that we always know where they are and that they're safe.
Good job, y'all. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
So I know that we are informed of things on an as, need to know basis. But it makes it hard when you say this student should not be left alone ever, but we don't know.
Well, we're not
You
saying,
guys know things that we don't know.
But we're on the 4 to 5 hours a day.
yeah, we're not saying that all students need, like, I don't know of really any students that couldn't be left alone ever,
Well,
but
that's kind of just an example, just the, we don't know of the heightened, just alerts, kind of, we just need, it's hard to know, and I know you guys can't share everything, but then,
Just when you treat somebody too, like in your class, or you are not to be hard
so
to
just
find.
maybe what are your shared information?
We need a little bit of follow-up, like if we refer a student or if we refer someone, we need a little bit of follow-up and just say, hey, I talked to this kid, we're gonna work on doing X, Y, and Z, or whatever the case may be. Is that what you're talking about, Ms. Owens?
Yes, it is,
Yeah.
just because we
Or
don't
like-
know
I mean,
where
we-
to go after that.
Or like look for us without disclosing what
Exactly.
is that you need it, like,
Yeah.
we shouldn't know, but like
Yeah.
look for us, just so we can be aware and help you out and the student.
We just wanna give them everything they need,
right.
but sometimes we don't know what they need.
Exactly.
I would say I really tried to follow up with teachers as much as possible with as much information as I can, but if I didn't, it was probably more of just, I got busy and I forgot. Sometimes parents will say, under no circumstances do I even want anyone to know my student was even assessed. And in that case, and even in that case, I'll just say, I can't really say. All I can say is that the student needs some extra attention. You know what I mean? But for the most part, I really tried to follow up with the teachers. I would say if you have a concern like that and you've referred someone, you can ask us, and because honestly, sometimes it's just that we forgot to follow up, because there could have been 3 that day, or it could have been,
Honestly, we just assume if we don't get a follow-up that it's not something that we're privy to.
I would just
Oh,
ask,
no,
and
don't
then we'll
think
tell
that,
you.
then, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll just tell you as much as we can, honestly, because I agree. I mean, when you get these students back, you want to know, like, okay, so how do I support this student? So definitely, it's not that we're trying to necessarily keep anything. Sometimes we forget, and sometimes we remember to tell you, and we try to tell you. it's just a lot of different things that play into it. But I would always ask, and we'll tell you if we can't say anything. But, I mean, and you kind of know too, I don't know, like, if they're gone, if you send them to us and for a suicide assessment and then they're gone for a week, we don't really have to tell you where they are. You kind of know that they've gotten help. You know what I'm saying? So, so we're not necessarily going to come to you and say they were hospitalized, but you can kind of put it together and you kind of know in that case.
Yeah, I just wanted to add just briefly, like in these situations, and I think you're right, the follow-up is important. So that's probably something that we can improve on, how to do that. But when you have students that you know, you see a pattern, like maybe they're constantly going to the counseling office, or you had a suspicion that there's something emotional going on with that student, that's enough to know, okay, let me tread a little bit lighter with this student. Let me maybe pull them aside one-on-one, you know, when you have those type of just suspicions or gut feelings. But yeah, I think the follow-up, we can improve on that. Sometimes, a lot of times with those defects referrals, we don't get notification of what's happening. It could be months. I mean, I've got stuff that's coming into my inbox last week, and I'm like, I submitted this report a long time ago. But if you have a suspicion, or you notice, since you're spending so much time with these students, you know them, you get to know, like, okay, this student is a little bit more sensitive than this one. I need to handle this one this way. So you just have to kind of make it a point to do that for those kids. But we can definitely work on that, how to follow up better, like come up with something to follow up. Oh.
If you have a student that comes up to you and say, hey, Ms. Gentry, I just got it, I was gone for a week. You notice I was gone? Like, yeah, we noticed. Oh, I was in the psychiatric ward for a week.
I would let your counselor know, just to say, hey, did you know? Because sometimes we may not know, you know? Sometimes students go to hospitalization when they're at home. You know, they could be at home and call that number and be taken for a hospitalization. And we don't know, so it's always best just to say, hey, are you aware? Because most parents are good about telling us if their student is hospitalized outside of school, but sometimes they aren't. And so then just to let us know so we can check on them. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Just to make sure that we know.
Any more questions?
And also, I guess along those lines, if a student is hospitalized, I would say, we do have some students that come back and announce it. I would try to shut that down real quick too, okay? Especially, and we try to do that because if a student is hospitalized, before they come back, they have to have a re-entry meeting with ourselves and the social worker. And so we try to say the less that people know, the better. You know, we might say, you can say you're on vacation, you went to go visit a relative, whatever, but we're not gonna come in and just share all this, because then that opens up a whole nother situation, right? So we always tell students the less people know, the better, because they said, well, I thought it was okay for these people to know, but now everyone knows. You know what I mean? Well, when you tell one 7th grader, you might as well have told the whole school.
Exactly.
So the less people know, the better. And did you want to add anything to that? 'Cause this is kind of your specialty here. Right? Yes.
Not really. I know that if there is like a re-entry meeting, sometimes this kids come back with a safety plan, and sometimes we may provide that to the teachers, just like be on the lookout for this. And we know we can't stop anything, like we can't stop the kids from having sharp objects, because we can't give it to certain kids and then say, hey, don't give it to this one. But sometimes there will be like a safety plan that I may share with the teachers, just so you guys are aware of like some things to look out for. Also some of the protective factors, some things that they may use at the hospitalization, just to give you guys some extra support.
That's a good point.
That would be great. That would be great. I was gonna say earlier, I think if y'all stress to the parents that you're really doing your child a disservice if you don't tell teachers, because
Yeah.
we're with them. And so if something happens, and we do nothing about it because the parents don't want us to know,
Right.
I mean, you just skipped a major step. I mean,
Yes.
we are there like moms here.
That's it. That's
And
it.
so maybe stress that we need to know.
I agree 100%. And we
And
do.
so I think it's
And
more,
most,
I think it's more what you said, Maureen. I think it's a parent thing when they tell y'all that they don't want us to.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
yeah. I mean, we do have there have been quite a few that say, I don't want anyone to know. Like as far as like, I don't even want the attendance person to know.
Exactly.
Then why would you call?
Yes.
That's it.
Well, I mean, they gotta come soon, 'cause they
Yeah,
out more than
exactly.
two or three days.
Like they'll send me the discharge papers and then say, but no one in that building should see those papers other than you. So, yes, and I agree, because you're the ones that are with the students all day long, so you're the ones that are gonna see those warning signs. But again, the whole other part of that is that some parents say, you know, it's not serious, it was for attention, I mean, there's a whole lot of other things that, you know, some parents, yeah. Anyway, let me stop.
Go ahead.
Related, I know we're talking about suicide prevention, but keep in mind too, that these kids are also exposed to it. My daughter went through an experience when she was about 10 years now, where someone very dear to her did commit suicide. She felt a lot of guilt for the way that, how did she not see it, how did she not that? But in doing that, in that experience, I reached out to the counselor at Woodland, and Woodland was the one that gave me the tools to help her go through a grieving process that I had no idea I could even
Right.
begin with her. And there were a lot of tools that the teachers and the counselor were able to provide me. So I know we're learning about trying to prevent, but I think these kids unfortunately are exposed to it more than we know. And that is still kind of related to being aware of the fact that they may have been exposed to that situation and not know how to deal with that. And that could also be a sign of, hey, you know, let's give them some more tools to help. I mean, it's just a lot for these kids. It's a lot.
Any other questions about anything we talked about? Just building those relationships, that's all we've been talking about, I feel like, the last few days, is just how important that is, that students feel like they belong here. You know, even just as much as noticing if they're absent, if they're there, those kinds of things make students feel like they belong here and that they have worth, you know, that's a big thing, so. But yeah, and just let us know if you have any questions, concerns, obviously we're here, a little busy right now, but, you know, we're here. But, yeah, schedules are not done, so they accidentally released them, the county accidentally made them available for 4 hours yesterday, and so. They did.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, and